Greetings, folks. Iolair here to talk about anti-air or AA builds in World of Warships. The match in the background features myself in the Tier 7 German heavy cruiser, the Yorck, and I entered this battle having made a colossal mistake. My ship's 19-point commander had no allocated skills. I'll get to how this happened in a moment, but to quote the late great Bob Ross, this actually ended up being a happy accident, as the results from this match offered good motivation to prepare an AA build video. This is a Tier 7 domination match on Haven. I am in a division with two other players also in Tier 7 cruisers, including Borges in the premium Italian light cruiser, the Abruzzi, and Jimmy Jazz in the premium Royal Navy light cruiser, HMS Belfast. So how did I enter a battle with a skillless commander? Well, I was taking advantage of an offer Wargaming made in 0.8.7 to get free commander respecs as part of their introduction of the new massive AA fire skill. Now, this new skill replaced the former manual fire control for AA armament skill, which most simply referred to as manual AA. There was a little bit of a catch to get this free respec offer. For folks who didn't know, you had to click a participate button on the 0.8.7 announcement article on the Warships website. I'll leave a link to that article in the description below. But unfortunately, at the time I was preparing this video, that offer had expired, I think back on August 29th. In any case, I did reset commanders that had AA builds, mostly US Navy destroyers and German cruisers, as I wasn't sure whether I wanted to take the massive AA fire skill. And as for this particular match, I didn't reacquire my skills from my Yorck commander after doing the reset and before hitting the battle button. So that's how I got into kind of this mess. In any case, as it turns out, I am glad I dropped the massive AA fire skill for my AA-centric ships. I would consider picking up the new skill for ships with mediocre or poor AA, but more on that later. Finally, just to let folks know that I am using my Discord server, Facebook group, and Twitter accounts to announce upcoming content and interact with the community. If you haven't already, I welcome you to subscribe or follow me on those platforms. Links are available in the description below, as well as in the About section of my YouTube channel. So let me first start with AA builds in general and a little bit of background. After the carrier rework release in 0.8.0 and before 0.8.7 was available, the general recommendation, and consensus from community contributors and Wargaming had been that the combination of basic firing training, or BFT, along with the former manual AA skills, offered the most potent combination of AA skills overall. Now, in general, anything to increase continuous AA damage or to concentrate that damage has been the best option to improve AA both in the past and even today, since carrier players cannot avoid continuous AA damage when their planes enter AA ranges. Now, to this point, the BFT skill increases continuous damage of AA by 10%, which is obviously very useful for AA, and the former manual AA skill improved the strength of reinforced AA sectors and shorten the reinforcement time of those sectors, and both of those benefits were generally seen as very useful for AA-centric ships to maximize their continuous AA damage. Now, Little White Mouse did some extensive analysis of continuous AA damage earlier this year, and that analysis did corroborate the value of both BFT and the manual AA skill. I'll leave a link to Little White Mouse's article in the description below. Now, with the introduction of 0.8.7, the massive AA fire skill replaces the manual AA skill, and the behavior of the priority AA sector has changed as well. Now, Notzer covered the new AA mechanics introduced with 0.8.7 in a recent video. I do encourage everyone to watch that video, as it covers a number of important points and explains the effects in detail. I'll leave a link to Notzer's video in the description below. Now, note that Notzer refers to the massive AA fire skill as, quote, fierce firing, but these are the same thing, and Wargaming was simply finalizing the name of the new skill at the time Notzer prepared his video. In any case, the key point of the changes in how priority AA sector works in 0.8.7 is the idea of gradually increasing AA power on the reinforced sector side, followed by a cooldown period. So far, the general opinion of players is that the new reinforced AA sector mechanic in 0.8.7 is very effective. Now, upon setting a reinforced sector, there's an immediate burst of increased damage, followed by, and this is key, a gradual increase of continuous AA damage for several seconds. In addition to Notzer's video that I previously mentioned, the details of increased AA damage along with the period of increased continuous damage are covered in detail in the World of Warships article on 0.8.7. Again, a link for that article is in the description below. Now, in contrast, with the new massive AA fire skill, the reinforced AA sector mechanic works very differently. Specifically, upon reinforcing an AA sector, there's a single pulse-like 100% increase in AA damage, followed by a 50% increase in cooldown period for reinforcing AA sectors. So the pulse of AA has the potential to shoot down several aircraft immediately, but note that this skill does not offer any of the ramp up of the continuous AA like we see with ships that don't have this massive AA fire skill when they reinforce AA sectors. Now, similar to Notzer's observations, I can see that the massive AA fire skill is useful for ships with mediocre or poor AA to give them some decent chance to shoot down a material number of planes. However, I currently would not recommend the massive AA fire skill for ships with decent or very good AA, since I expect that continuous AA damage production from reinforced sectors provides much more reliable and consistent results. Now, getting to other skills to improve AA, what continues to be the best option, as I mentioned earlier, is to improve continuous AA through BFT, since its function has not changed in 0.8.7. The next skill to consider for AA is AFT, or Advanced Firing Training, which is also unchanged in 0.8.7. Now, AFT provides increased damage to planes that fly through medium and long-range AA bursts. These are these flat clouds that you can see around ships as their AA is going off. Now, what makes this skill theoretically valuable for AA is that it affects planes that fly through these bursts, but skilled players are able to avoid these bursts, or a lot of them, and that fact mitigates a lot of AFT's potential usefulness for AA. Now, since AFT is such a high-cost commander skill for what appears to be limited AA value, the general guidance is to not take AFT primarily for AA purposes. Note that AFT's function to increase the ranges of both small caliber main batteries as well as secondary batteries is unchanged, so keep on taking AFT to beef up your gunboat destroyers and secondary build battleships. That part doesn't change. Now, finally, as for upgrades that improve AA, we have three choices. The first is AA Guns Modification 1 for slot 3, which increases the number of bursts from medium and long-range AA defenses. Now, as I mentioned when I discussed AFT, skilled carrier players can avoid a lot of these bursts, so there's some debate about the value of the AA Guns Modification 1 upgrade. However, increasing the number of bursts can indeed make it harder for carrier players to avoid all of the bursts or avoid a lot of them. So I generally do take the AA Guns Modification 1 upgrade on most cruisers starting at Tier 6 and even some Tier 5, especially those with solid medium and long-range AA like the German and US Navy cruisers. And I also take the AA Guns Modification 1 upgrade on AA-centric destroyers, especially those of the US Navy and those of the alternate Soviet destroyer branch. Now, the second AA upgrade to consider is AA Guns Modification 2 for slot 6. This upgrade increases damage from bursts, but more importantly, it also increases continuous AA damage, so like BFT, this is clearly very useful for AA. Taking this upgrade, however, is likely quite uncommon since players often prefer to take other choices, notably Main Battery Modification 3 or Torpedo Tubes Modification 3 to improve the main battery or torpedo tube reload times respectively. I can see that the AA Guns Modification 2 upgrade would be useful for maybe AA destroyer builds in competitive arenas where carriers are involved, but this strikes me as quite specialized. The third AA upgrade option to discuss is the Defensive AA Fire Modification 1 special upgrade for Slot 2, available to Tier 8 through Tier 10 cruisers and destroyers that can mount the Defensive AA Fire consumable. This upgrade is very useful for AA-centric ships since it does increase duration of the Defensive AA Fire consumable by 20%, and I do take this upgrade on most of my upper tier US Navy destroyers, especially the USS Kidd and USS Fletcher. So the bottom line to me is to keep on taking the BFT skill and the AA Guns Modification 1 upgrade for the core of AA builds, and right now that's about it. Now for my AA-centric destroyers that used to have the manual AA skill, I've taken the 4 points and applied them to radiolocation. That's a pretty obvious choice for a destroyer. For my AA-centric cruisers, where I used to have the manual AA skill, I'm not entirely sure where I'll spend those 4 points. I may take radiolocation, I might take a level 3 and a level 1 skill, or maybe a couple of level 2 skills. I think it will kind of depend upon the ship and how I play it and its function. So coming back to my Yorck, yes, I did set the skills on the commander after this battle. Like I mentioned, I did allocate all but 4 points and have left the last 4 points free until I figure out what I want to do with her. As luck would have it for this match, I guess I did okay, since I'd earned top XP for the game, even though my ship was quite handicapped. Probably more luck than brains. In any case, I did shoot down 20 Tier 6 planes, so it can't be all bad. I hope you found this topic interesting and useful and the material insightful. Let us know your thoughts about the AA changes in 0.8.7 in the comments below. And as always, we hope to see you out there and we wish you happy sailing.